As customers, we have a good sense of what a great deal is, but as sellers, we're much less certain about what that value is. You need to have value conversations to get at that.
Coffee's for closers only.
So we've established my proposal is sound in principle. Now we're just haggling over price.
Let's see how much we're going for on eBay.
Man, it's the same as Dunkin' Donuts. Costs 15 times the price.
Today's podcast is sponsored by Jennings Executive Search. I had a great conversation with John Jennings about the skills needed in different pricing roles. He and I think a lot alike. If you're looking for a new pricing role, or if you're trying to hire just the right pricing person, I strongly suggest you reach out to Jennings Executive Search. They specialize in placing pricing people. Say that 3 times fast. Welcome to Impact Pricing, the podcast where we discuss pricing, value, and the undeniable relationship between them. I'm Mark Stiving, and I run boot camps to help companies get paid more. Our guest today is the one and only Ed Arnold. Here are 3 things you want to know about Ed before we start. His title says he's a value-based product and pricing strategist. I've never heard of value-based products before, although I understand it. It's awesome. He is an advisor at Ibica with my good friend Stephen Forth. He spent many years at Leverage Point, so he understands value probably deeper than most of us do. And he was on the podcast May of 2022, so 2+ years ago. Welcome, Ed.
Well, thank you, Mark. It's great to be back here.
It's good to have you back. So I'm sure I asked this before and you answered it before, but how'd you get into pricing?
By accident.
Just the standard answer, by the way, but go ahead.
Yeah, no, I don't. No one grows up and say, "Gee, Dad, I want to be a pricing consultant when I grow up." I was working at the Monitor Group and had the opportunity to work with Tom Nagel and his group of consultants who came in by acquisition to Monitor Group. And at that time, I was developing software products for Monitor, and they wanted to create an e-learning course on pricing. And I disobeyed orders and created a pricing tool based on Nagel's work. And we created Leverage Point out of that, which also created a category. So I call myself a founder of a company and a founder of a category, which is nice to say. And that's how I got started and have stayed in it, have tried to leave it, but keep coming back.
So why do you keep coming back?
I think it's because, one, there's a demand for it. And the thing about pricing is, you mentioned it in my title, right? Value-based product strategy. Well, pricing is part of strategy. People think about it as a tactic, and usually clients will hire consultants to fix a tactical problem, like we need to raise prices, right? Or, adjust our pricing. And then you look at it, and it's a much deeper, broader problem. And it ties to strategy, right? How are you positioned? Who do you compete against? Who's your market? Are you focused, or are you spread all over the place? So I think you cannot solve any pricing issue without tackling the strategy. And if the strategy is flawed, then the pricing isn't going to help you.
Yeah, so this is such an interesting concept. I think if you said, here's the product, here's the market, here's the customer, here's the situation, put a price on it, you could do that. And it's a very tactical thing. But as soon as you start to say, how do we get the most for what it is that we deliver to our customers? Now it's the strategy, right? Now it's the product and the positioning and right. It's all the pieces.
Yeah.
And since nobody thinks about pricing till the end, they don't think about, well, how do we get the most?
Yeah. And like what you just said, well, first you think about your market and your customer, and you make a bunch of cascading choices, right? That would be something that Stephen Forth would say. But you make a series of choices, right? And they're high level choices that lead to, then the pricing's easy, actually. If you make those deliberate choices and they're good choices and they're fact-based and they're tested, then the pricing is pretty easy. Problem is, a lot of companies don't go through that cascade. So there's a misalignment. And then they say, well, gosh, we're not executing on plan. We're not meeting our numbers. It's the price, obviously, right? Our prices are too high. And then in comes the pricing consultant. And so what I'm saying is that, okay, well, we can do that. But again, if you're in the wrong market, or if your product really doesn't have a lot of value, and I've done that. I've done value models where, rather than the numbers being green, they're red, and they're saying, oh, you got a flaw in your software. No, software's working. It's a flaw in your product. You're not actually providing, value over what a competitor does. So what are you going to do about it? It's not a pricing problem. It's a product problem. Maybe you need to redesign the product, or maybe you need to find another market, or whatever. There's a lot of choices there. So for me, that's kind of where I start with any sort of assignment. Like, what is it that you're trying to do? What market are you trying to penetrate? How are you positioned? Right? How are you going to market? All of those things. The biggest mistake I think I see is that everyone wants to cover too much ground, especially smaller companies do this, right? We were working, this is at Ibica, working with a client, was two software companies in adjacent space. They merged, and one was serving sort of the high end of the market. The other one was serving the low end of the market. So from the investor's point of view, oh, it's great. We just got this big piece. We're going to value. One of the first questions I asked them was, okay, which market are you going to give up? And they looked at me like I had three heads. Well, we're not going to give up anything. It's like, well, then your execution is going to have some issues. And, they happen. It's not because I'm brilliant. It's because it's the law of physics, law of business. You can't be everything to everyone, right? I don't care what your investors expect. You can't do that.
Right. And so I oftentimes think in sound bites. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to give a soundbite that I'm going to pull out of what you said a few minutes ago, which I thought was brilliant. And that is, if you find pricing hard, it's because you haven't made all the other business decisions correctly.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I wouldn't say it quite that way, but it's basically a symptom that you have a deeper problem, right? And I think salespeople know that probably the best, because they're out there trying to pitch things. And if they're running into issues like that, the feedback, a price is too high, the price is too high, that's what they hear. But if you unpack that, right, it's not that the price is too high. There's some other issue there. So, I think one of the things, I think that's what led to this particular podcast is, I recently wrote an article about value conversations, right? Because usually, and look, I've done a lot of projects like that, and they're good projects where they say, okay, get me a value calculator, because they say the price is too high, so a value calculator will fix that, right? It can help. But again, if you have a good solid value prop, yeah, it will help. If you don't, then you're going to have to step back and look at what business are we really in, and should we realign our product and our market. So that's how that works. So assuming that is working well, then that's what my article was about. It was like, okay, well, just having the calculator isn't enough. You need to do more with that to execute on it.
Yeah. By the way, I love that article. I told you that in the comments.
Thank you. That was high praise. It made my day when I heard that.
And I want to talk about that some more.
Yeah.
Let's start by talking about ROI calculators for a second.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things I find interesting is, have you ever gone online and filled out an ROI calculator and it says, hey, you're going to make 1,000 times what you invest in this. Just put your money here.
Sure.
And as soon as you do that, you're like, I just don't believe this.
Yeah.
Right?
That's very common.
I'm not going to give you my money. And so nobody's going to put together an ROI calculator that doesn't say you're going to get some huge return.
Yes.
And so I just don't trust them. And I think that's true with all of our clients as well.
Yes, that's true. Nobody trusts them. And in fact, I sort of back away of saying ROI, which is kind of being a weasel, but I say payback, right? So
Mm,
that's kind of what Ibica does in their tool. But yeah, I mean, I think payback is kind of it. Like for every dollar you put in, how much money are you going to get out of this over the life of the subscription or the investment? Yeah, but most people don't and one of the reasons for that is if you type in ROI in Google in any product category, you're going to get tons of white papers and things like that. And I worked at Forrester where they had a whole group of people who wrote these white papers. It was a really nice business for them, and they were basically value models. When I first saw it, I said, "Holy smokes! We do these now," but they were getting paid a princely sum to essentially put together a one size fits all value model that wasn't even based on a particular customer. It would be based on a bunch of customers, and it was well done. I mean, the value drivers were sound and stuff like that, but they would sell that, and then but the ROIs were. It was funny. They would go through the exercise, and then they would put these like fudge factors in there. They would say, "Oh, level of confidence," or something like that, and they would cut that ROA down as much as possible for exactly that reason. That sort of reverse sticker shock. Too
right.
good to be true. Yeah, but that's what happens, and so and those are well done ones. There's a lot of not so good ROI on there. So of course customers have become really cynical about that, and they just reject them out of hand.
And so why? Well, first off, define for us a value conversation.
Yeah. So the way I see it is the value conversation is really like the last mile of a value pricing execution. It's where you make that value prop come to life for that customer, not for the market, not for another customer, but for that customer. It's all about that customer, right? So what do I get from this? Right? I know people have great, I want to know. So that's what a value conversation is. It's basically having that discussion before you get into showing what the ROI or the payback is. It's having that collaborative discussion with the customer, and it's got to be sincere. It's not, and good salespeople do this. Back in the day, they called it, consultative selling,
Right.
right? But that is like really understand what listen to what your customer is really telling you, not be prepared with the pitch deck or the demo. What do they really care about? And then if it's something that you can't help them, then just being honest about it. Well, can't help you with this, but thank you for your time. I mean, who does that? I mean, but when you do that, you develop trust. And I've done that with clients and said, I can't help you with that, but I know I can help you find people to do that. And that's being, I think, a good professional. So anyway, that's what that is. You have that conversation with them. And then if you're really good, then you start to connect the dots between, hey, we work with customers with that particular problem, and we have a solution that addresses that. And in our case, and we say we can improve things, by X%. And we could probably figure out what that's worth to you. Maybe it's some additional costs we can take out or some efficiency in there. Give me some numbers. And then it's sort of this back of the envelope sort of thing and say, hey, and the way I look at it is I look at it in terms of digits, right? Am I saving you 4 digits? Not a big deal. 5 digits? I'll consider you. 6 digits? Okay, well, that sounds too good to be true. Maybe we'll dig into that, get a little bit more precision around it. But it's basically getting that sort of thing, not to prove a number, but to develop trust that we're a vendor that's worth talking to.
Yeah, I love this whole concept of trust. I find that when I talk to people about value conversations, they tend to think, at least the first initial reaction is, oh, you want me to go manipulate my customer? And it's like, no, I don't. What I want you to do is find out, is there value there? right? Is there value to them? Is there value to us, right? Is this worth us having more conversations about?
Well, it's like, can I really help you? It's
Yes.
basically what it is. And so if you're, if you have like no ethics at all and say, I can help everybody solve whatever problem it is, whatever they tell me, then you're not a very trustworthy fellow and go away. Right. So it takes time and patience and, the diligence to really prove it. And sometimes you don't do it on the first date, right? I mean, you got to go back 2, 3, 4, or 5 times until you develop trust. I heard the best, um, the best definition of, I can't remember who gave it to me, was that trust is basically keeping 100 promises. I
Mm.
love that. And I mean little things like show up on time, be prepared. If you said, I'm going to get you something tomorrow, get it to them tomorrow. These are the things that I've always lived by as a consultant. And that's why, and you get a reputation, for being reliable. And so that's what vendors need to do. You've got to keep your promises. And so if you start having that sort of engagement with people, I'll tell you more about your problem. Because if you go and you do an ROI calculator without that trust and you say, hey, I just need to have some information about your business in order to do, figure out your ROI. Well, tell me how many employees, how much do they make, how much do you spend on this and that. They're going to, whoa, wait a minute.
Yep.
I'm not going to give that to you. And so that hits and then people say, well, we can't use this, Ed, because, they're not going to give us any of the data. And it's like, no, you're not. Yeah. So you need to have that conversation before you even talk about that to see if it's even worth having a conversation. I was working with a client like last week and I said, look, how many value conversations are you going to have? And then how many of those do you think we'll take that list, cut it in half and say about half of them is probably worth having the next step. Right. Because let's just say if it's a customer that's very price conscious, they have no budget, this, that, and the other thing, why go to the effort of building? They're not going to buy from you. They're not going to buy for you at the price you want. So, hey, just know that. Focus on other better clients that where you can do more for them and they're willing to pay for it. So that's what a conversation does. And again, it's not a pricing thing. It's just really good sales, and good salespeople have been doing this forever.
So you say the word good salespeople, and I'm totally with you. What percent are good salespeople? and so I'm going to give you a Forrester quote since you said, hey, I used to work at Forrester.
Yeah.
Forrester says 22% of salespeople know their customer's business and how they can help them.
Yeah, I would say something around 20%, but yeah, that aligns with it. I think that's true. There's a lot of turnover in sales, lots of people, they churn that all the time. So it's a tough job. That's why product-led growth is so sexy, because you don't need salespeople, right? The product sells itself. But you can't. Go ahead.
But the thing about salespeople, which I find shocking, especially given what you and I do, and the fact that we have to learn how our customers run their businesses quickly, and in fact, how our customers' customers run their businesses quickly, right? So the fact that a salesperson doesn't understand how they help their customers make more profit, I just find shocking to me.
Oh, me too. I absolutely, like, do your homework. Like, at least look up who you're talking to on LinkedIn, read a little bit about their business, right? No, just show some curiosity. I mean, come on. But no, I'm just as surprised as you, Mark. How they don't want to do it or don't feel it's important. Or, I mean, I think the worst type of salesperson is someone who immediately wants to push the demo button. To me, I ask, like, how quickly and when do you show the demo? I show it in the first call. I'm like, oh my God, you're gonna show the same demo you show to everybody else in the same way? No one's gonna like that. I mean, I wouldn't demo anything, when I was like selling software at Leverage Point until I knew enough about them to give them a demo that I thought would be interesting. And even then, I would get it wrong. But just to do the press and record, don't do the demo. just record a demo and do it. But
Well,
they're not going to watch it anyway.
and that kind of goes back to where we started this conversation when you said, hey, how are you going to focus your business?
Mm-hmm.
Because if we're going to go after every market segment and every type of customer there is, it's really hard for a salesperson to say, yeah, I understand your business. Yeah, I understand how I'm going to make you money.
It is. And that's why, part of the toolkit is having, playbooks, right? So when I was at Forrester, that would be the thing I would do. I'd have a playbook for each sort of market. When you talk to this company, this type of company, this type of person, stress these things, So I think companies that invest in that, and build up that capability, the tools and whatnot. Maybe you don't even need an ROI calculator in some cases, but sometimes if there is sort of a buying committee on the customer side, and they're going to want to get some kind of an ROI of some kind, not that the one that the salesperson uses is going to be the be all and end all, but at least it's a data point that says, hey, based on this conversation with these sort of estimates, we think we're going to get like a 7-digit payback out of this.
Yeah. So I'm going to say something that you might disagree with, Ed, because if you come from the leverage point world,
yeah.
But I think value conversations are way more powerful when you make the customer do the math. So instead of walking in with the Excel spreadsheet and saying, hey, let's fill this out, or, the model, it's just asking the questions and knowing in your head what that model looks like so that you can lead the customer to doing the math and saying, oh, I'm going to make this much money. Got it.
You may be surprised. I totally agree with you.
Do you?
Nice. No, I don't. No, actually the best way to do it, I'll tell you the best way to do it. Because listen, I've had so many value conversations with customers, because what I do as part of my work is I will actually interview my customers' customers and record it with a value model. Basically saying, and they say, well, we can't do value conversations. They're too hard. I said, I just recorded 5 of them. And each one of them I get, not to sell, but like to get them on board with, do you think this is a reasonable estimate? And I can do that in like 15, 20 minutes. And then they're like, oh, but the trick to that, and I've learned this the hard way, is that you can't come in with a bunch of numbers and with a solution. They'll push back on that. Immediately there's, black box, there's something evil in here.
Yep.
You can't have a blank slate, because then you get the deer in the headlight look. All right. So you got to have a straw man in there. And the way I pitch it is that, hey, I did some homework on you, and here's a particular value driver. And I don't know exactly what your margins are, but I looked up, the industry average, and it's this. And your size company, I'm thinking you probably got X number of people that do this, and this is what you're paying them, and blah, 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 blah. And I think it's roughly about this. And then they'll look at it and they say, well, that number is wrong. Okay, let's change it. We change it real time. That's what the software does. Both Leverage Point and Ibica's Valio do the same thing. Real time. Guess what happens? When the customer changes the number, it becomes their answer. That's the magic right there. That is the magic trick. You get them started. If there's like 6 items in the formula, let them change one. And then suddenly it becomes a little bit more believable. So that's kind of how you do it. And when you get through that, then you say, and then at the end you say, okay, so we came up with, a 6-digit, improvement. If we do this, can we continue the conversation? Can we get down more through the buying process? It's not going to be, I'll buy it. It's like, okay, I got something here. And what you want to be able to do is, and this happens over multiple sessions, but eventually you're making your contact, your sales contact, into the advocate for the value, because it's not, and this is the thing that I think about value stories, it's not about the product. It's about the customer. The customer is the star of this story. It's your advocate saying, hey, management committee, here's how I'm going to improve profitability in our company next year if we invest in the solution. See how that changes? This is how we do it.
And what's amazing about that is if you do, you can actually have an entire value conversation and never talk about a product.
If it's done great, it doesn't come up at all.
It's all about what KPIs are we going to move for the customer and how much money is that going to make them.
Exactly. And then the price becomes like almost like a detail. Then it becomes really a tactical thing. And of course, there's always negotiation, always. But it's not going to be, oh, you have to give us 10% because we did a competitive bid and blah, 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 or you got to do it. That goes out the window because basically they say, oh, yeah, we got to get this thing done. And then procurement will say, well, we have to. And they say, no, wait, this has already been approved. We're moving ahead. So when it's done well, that's what it looks like. Now, not all situations go that way, but that's the prize. That's what you're aiming for.
Yep. Okay. So how do you teach this to salespeople? How do you get salespeople to learn to do this?
Well, there's a lot of things you have to do. One, they have to understand what a value model is and isn't, right? Then they need to, and usually I work with them to develop the value model. So making sure, and it's like, well, where do the value driver formulas come from? Well, a lot of them comes from the marketing department. They make these claims, I always start from there and say, okay, well, your marketing communications say that you cut costs in here and you improve efficiency like that. And so prove it. Like, tell me why you say those things. Give me the evidence for that. And, as you can expect, Mark, it's a little thin. There's a anecdote here, a thing here, a nice customer quote there. Okay, so we start with that. We say, let's just assume what we may not have the proof for it, but what is the actual hypothesis that we want to say? And then we start with that. So they have to understand what those value drivers are. Then the conversation is, well, then how do you get that information to make that happen? And we talk about, that initial value conversation, which is basically being able to ask those open-ended questions, listening, connecting the dots, showing some, saying, well, here's some here's a case that we worked on. Again, we haven't done any math yet. And then once they're starting to say, okay, do you want to see what that's worth? Okay, either in a future meeting or if they want to do it in that meeting, they'll say, well, this is kind of what this would look like. Can you help me refine this a little better? Maybe we can get some better information. Do you think this will work? This will work? Because a lot of times you don't need, like, I'll create a value model that will sometimes have like 6 or 7 value drivers. I'm working with a client now that has like a dozen of them. And I say, you can't show, you got to know which ones, there's like 2 or 3 that you need. That's it. But you don't know what those are until you have a conversation. So at least figure out what those are. Is it top of funnel? Is it, retention? Is it asset? Figure it out.
I kind of like the idea of having a dozen value models or more. I don't really care. And asking the client what's important to them, and then knowing, oh, it's these 3 value models. Let me pull these out. And
well, custom. Exactly. That's what I'm saying. You have that conversation. So in terms of training them, they have to know what the complete value model is without showing it to them, right? But they have to have that, and sometimes that's where the playbook comes in, where you have some scripts and say, if you really want to break it down and make it and scale it and be hand-holding sort of tools, then scaffolding tools, you can have these things. And then you could say, well, if I do some homework, I'll know that it's pretty likely that these are the 3 that I will test and have that. But again, it's open-ended conversations. But if they say this, I may bring another one out. And then if I think there's one that should apply, I'll ask a direct question. Do you think this will apply? So you're having a conversation, but it's like solving a mystery a little bit. It takes a little bit of time, and it definitely takes practice, and it can't sound like an interrogation. It's got to be a really friendly, God, you're so amazing, Mark. I want to know everything about you. Tell me about, how you, find clients, and tell me what, sort of issues you run into when you're doing projects. And, oh, tell me another story about that. So there's a lot of those sorts of things. And then I can kind of figure out, okay, he cares about this, doesn't care about that. Okay, he has other stakeholders here that might care about this. So you kind of have to put this together. Now, the amount of time that you invest in it is, directly related to what ACV you're going after.
Right.
You can't do this for, like a $10,000 a year subscription. It's way too expensive. Your CAC is way too high, right? So you have to sort of, depending on how big your average customer is, you have to calibrate this up and down. If it's a large enterprise, then certainly you're going to go all out because those customers are just so valuable.
But if we take a step back, the concepts we're talking about apply for your marketing programs.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're going after $100 ACV,
mm-hmm.
great. Use these same concepts in marketing.
Yeah. And they do it different ways. They'll collect the data other ways. They'll get it from social media. They'll test things. The tools are there to collect the data you need to do that. I don't focus on that part of the market. I focus on more on the larger customers.
Yeah. Ed, this is fascinating as always. We're going to have to wrap it up though, because we're running out of time. Final question for you.
Mm-hmm.
What's one piece of pricing advice you'd give our listeners that you think could have a big impact on their business?
Yes. Well, remember what Warren Buffett said: price is what you pay, value is what you get. As customers, we have a good sense of what a great deal is, but as sellers, we're much less certain about what that value is. You need to have value conversations to get at that.
Absolutely spot on. Thank you. Thank you, Ed. And thanks for your time today. If anybody wants to contact you, how can they do that?
LinkedIn is the best way. And I, put articles out all the time. So just reach out to me. If you comment on articles, I'd like that even better. So go through LinkedIn.
Great. We'll put a URL in the show notes. And to our listeners, thank you for your time. If you enjoyed this, would you please leave us a rating and a review? And I just have to, sorry for this one, Mark Herring, the Chief Marketing Officer of HiveMQ, he just left me a recommendation because I'd done a selling value workshop and keynote for his company. And here's a clip he pulled out, which I love. I know he will tell you his superpower is pricing, but I think it's his ability to explain complex concepts like price and value and makes them into very simple and actionable insights. So Mark, the check is in the mail. Thank you very much. And finally, if you have any questions or comments about the podcast, or if your company needs help getting paid more for the value you deliver, feel free to email me, mark@impactpricing.com. Now, go make an impact. Thanks again to Jennings Executive Search for sponsoring our podcast. If you're looking to hire someone in pricing, I suggest you contact someone who knows pricing people. Contact Jennings Executive Search.